Happy Friday, everyone. I'm gonna do a car update. I don't know who cares or listens to these videos, but I mean, honestly, it's really for my own record, and like reinforcement. So this is helpful to me to talk about. So with Vanny the Audi, I got the dye test done, and at Tire Plus, and the diagnosis was what my research had led me to believe that it was, that the entire front spool valve, and this part has many other names like variable timing control, oil control, VVT solenoid, VTEC solenoid. There's another name too, which adds to the confusion. It's like immersing yourself in the car world a little bit, you know. So yeah, they said, yeah, you have to replace that whole part, because what I got replaced on it was just a gasket, and it's not enough. The whole thing needs to be replaced, which I figured. That's what I figured. And I think from reading the Honda Odyssey forum and watching a bunch of videos of people replacing this part, a lot of them went through the same process that I have, you know, thinking it was that, then doing the gasket, and then I'm like, oh, I got to do the entire spool, you know. So Tire Plus quoted me something outrageous for the job, and it was kind of fun because I watched so many videos of people doing it, and like I was immersing myself in stuff just about this specific part on the van. I calculated in my brain, and I knew what the price of the part was. I calculated $400 would probably be a reasonable mechanic price to do this, right? And even that's quite a bit, $400, you know. But I figured $200 for the part, $200 for labor. So the Tire Plus quotes me double that, more than double. And I laughed. I was like, are you serious? I'm like, this is not even like, I mean, but then I learned to change the entire spool. You do need to remove the valve, the engine cover. So some people just replace the top part of this piece, which in my mind, I thought just the top part of it was called the solenoid. If you're just replacing the top part of it, the top half of it almost, I feel like that's how I see it, then you don't need to, remove the engine cover and fuck with the valve covers. The valve cover gaskets or whatever. But anyways, so yeah. So Tire Plus was charging over $800 to do that. And then this other shop, I feel like it's way more trusted, but they're farther away from me. They're charging $600 and something, but their price is reasonable considering what they were going to do, because they were going to replace the spool and also replace the engine gasket covers. But I already had those replaced twice, you know. So for those two jobs, because they said when they remove the engine cover, they like to replace those gaskets just in case that they damage them, you know. So, and therefore their price was $630. And for those two jobs, that makes sense. That's reasonable, actually, in my opinion. It's kind of reasonable. It's pretty reasonable, yeah. It's definitely reasonable. If I calculate it by what I've paid so far, right? Because I paid $200 something to get those gasket covers replaced. So if I calculate that plus the $300 or so, or $400 to do the entire spool, it adds up. But I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if that's the right thing either, you know. So then I called other places. I called the guy who's already been trying to work on my oil leak, but I feel like I have a really negative feeling in my heart here about him now. And I feel like I don't trust him anymore. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. Maybe he was just going through the process like everyone else trying to figure it out. But he just kept making it sound like, all right, yeah, it's done. You don't have an oil leak anymore. As where other people, other mechanics and places were aware that how tricky these oil leaks can be. Like you do one thing and then it comes out in another place. And like this one garage actually makes you come back in after a certain number of miles to double check that you don't have an oil leak, because they're aware that of this stuff. But this other guy was just like, he just made it sound like, oh, it's done, like it's done, you know, and it wasn't done, you know, and that really bothered me. He didn't say, hey, it's done, but these things can be tricky, so keep your eye out if there's still an oil leak and come back in and we'll fix it, you know. He didn't say that. He's kind of a little bit too cocky and a little grumpy, you know, which I find to be sometimes common for mechanics. I don't know, but sometimes, I don't know, from what I've learned. My cousin's husband was a mechanic, but I think he mostly focused on transmissions was his work. But he was really grumpy too, but that's not because he's a mechanic, but I don't know. So anyways, I don't have a good feeling about him anymore, and my heart just is like saying that's a no. So I'm like, his price was good though. He said $380 parts and labor. Okay. But I don't trust you anymore. You know? It's just kind of like dead. So then I get this thought, call Honda and see. You know, my little inner voice, God. So I call Honda, and actually Honda had the most reasonable price. And, you know, under $400. And I'm like, wow. As I'm talking about this, I could feel the stress coming up. It's crazy. So yeah, Honda quoted me the best price, but they're not changing. They don't seem to care about like the whole thing about taking extra precaution with the valve cover gaskets. You know, maybe it's just not a thing for them. The guy was like, yeah, every shop kind of does things differently, you know, which can make things more confusing for a consumer. But it's just like, I'm done with people who don't want to take time to explain things. Like, I don't care if you're a mechanic, if you're a fucking doctor, if you have the most highest degree in the motherfucking universe. If you don't want to take a moment and explain to your customers or your clients so that they can understand, if they want to understand. Some people don't want to understand, and that's fine. But if your client wants to understand what is going on with their vehicle and feels like they need a clearer picture and clearer understanding, you, if you care about having that client, should answer their questions and really help them understand if they want to understand. Like, I'm done with people who are just cocky and don't want to seem like they have time to help you understand. It's like, you know, oh well. So anyways, it looks like Honda it is. So I made an appointment. But then the other thing that struck me with fear and anxiety after I made this appointment with Honda, they're farther from me, but they let you wait. That's another thing with this one mechanic. He just wants you to drop off the car and come back and pick it up. But if I take it to Honda, they have, of course, they have a gigantic waiting room, and it's a job that I can wait there for to get done, which is a plus. But it's farther. And I was nervous about my transmission because I put transmission fluid, but I haven't really truly tested my car out on the highway, or, really going above 40 miles an hour to really feel out the transmission and how it's feeling. So immediately after I got off the phone with Honda, I got struck with fear and anxiety and adrenaline pumping through my body. And I was like, oh my God. And then I thought, well, worst comes to worst, I don't know. I can take the roads there, which would double my driving time, and not hop on the highway. Just a lot of fear, Or I can test out my vehicle going above 40 miles an hour before I go to Honda for my appointment. But that involves driving the car a lot, which involves more oil leaking onto my alternator. So you see, that's a predicament. That's a predicament there. But anyways, I don't know. You gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Like neither option sounds good. But anyway, I know I'll figure it out. Yeah, then I thought, well, man, if I test drive the car and then transmission still feels iffy, then what's the point of getting this oil thing fixed? Because what if my transmission has a problem? But I mean, it's in my mind, it's like it's gotta have to do with the fluid because it was extremely low. So I'm like, that's gotta be it. Maybe it just takes a few times of me driving it to really get the fluid in those, parts. So maybe that's what it is. Because I've driven it a little bit and I only went a little bit over 40, but I felt like I really couldn't tell. So yeah, that's what makes me nervous about just jumping on the highway. I'm like, So I'm like, that doesn't feel safe. I'm all about safety, and I'm like, oh God, if it doesn't feel safe, I don't want to do it, because when you're single, it's different. When you're single, you don't give a fuck. Well, at least I didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just you. Like, you're not as scared. But when you have children who rely upon you, that takes things to a whole nother level of survival and fear and anxiety, because now, like, you're responsible for other people's lives. So it's like safety. And if anything seems remotely unsafe, it's just like panic, fear, So anyways, because it's not just about your human life, it's about other human lives, little lives. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Vanny the Audi, and we shall see what happens next.